My daughter-in-law, Lena, flashed an unagreeable smile and threw me an unagreeable look as I stretched out my hand to get a hold of the phone so I could place a call and inquire about the date of my son Max's wedding. "We already went through with the marriage ceremony yesterday," she stated in her statement. "We only invited special people," she stated. And the impact of her words was similar to being suddenly soaked with a bucket of ice-cold water. Individuals who possess a distinctive nature or extraordinary qualities. I was the individual who purchased every single piece of furniture in their home, and I also provided financial assistance to pay off the $500 that they owe for their monthly rent over a span of 3 years. In addition to that, I made sure that their supply of food was never exhausted by checking their refrigerator on a daily basis and restocking it whenever it was needed. I was just an ordinary person and nothing else. While Lena was getting settled on the couch that my child and I had bought for her, my son avoided looking directly into my eyes. While sitting comfortably in my own living room, I was able to witness all of this. I grabbed onto the telephone as if it had the same weight as 1,000 pounds. The new shoes and the pale pink dress that I had chosen for her special day were of no further use to me, so I hung them up in my closet. I had the notion that I would be included in the day that was the most significant in the life of my only child, but that impression was inaccurate as well. I distinctly recall that I paid $200 for that clothing because I was eagerly anticipating seeing how fantastic I would appear in the photographs taken at Max's wedding. Nonetheless, I would not be able to attend the wedding, therefore these images would never come into being. Several weeks had passed since I began working so that I could verify that everything would be taken care of before the scheduled time. My goal was to give them a present with a value of $1,000 as a token of my appreciation for their wedding ceremony. I had been putting money aside so that I would be able to accomplish this. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to let her know about some incredible news that I had just been given. Due to my assumption that they would visit my home to join in the festivities with me after the wedding, I cleaned my house thoroughly from top to bottom. As soon as those 4 toxic words escaped from the mouth of the person who was speaking, everything came to an abrupt and immediate standstill within the blink of an eye. "It was an intimate affair, Mother," Max eventually declared, lifting his eyes and adopting a manner of speaking that appeared to have been rehearsed in advance. Despite the fact that there were just 2 of us and the witnesses present, I drew the conclusion that this was a falsehood. He said, "Only people who are special." I had a look at the pictures that had been uploaded to social media. I saw that Lena's parents, who were standing near to the bride and the groom, appeared to be really excited when I was there. I was in attendance at the ceremony, and I saw her brothers and sisters join in the toast by raising their champagne glasses. The white dress that Lena wore was an identical match to the one that I had helped her fund with the $800 that I had given to her the month prior. This was done in order to assist her in covering the costs associated with her personal issues. When all that I had not anticipated witnessing was noticed by me, I was present at that time. A week after that moment of shame, which is to say 7 days after that moment of embarrassment, Lena called me on the phone. When she spoke to me, the tone that she used was completely different from the one she had used in the past. The self-confident woman who had opted to exclude me from her wedding ceremony was no longer present at all. It was at this moment that she seemed to be at the breaking point of making a plea. Her voice had the quality of someone who was in a state of desperation. "Renata, we are way behind on the rent. We are getting pressured by the landlord, who made it very clear that if we do not pay this week, he will evict us." "You forgot to make the transfer," she responded in a written statement. It was possible to hear a slight quiver in her voice, which gave the impression that the end of days was drawing near. I paused for a few seconds so that I could recall all of the occasions that I had visited the bank to make the transfer. Every single time that I abandoned my own dreams and ambitions in order to ensure that children have a place to call home, every single instance in which I had to settle for a meal of beans and rice so that I could give them money to purchase the things that they wished. And after all of this time, they still have the nerve to speak to me as if nothing has ever transpired between us, despite the fact that they have excluded me from the most significant events of their lives. Against all odds, I was surprised to discover that I began with a feeling of serenity that was even remarkable to myself. "Lena," I began. "I warned you, didn't I, that I only provide my assistance to those who are truly exceptional?" The silence that blanketed the other end of the line was so profound that I could even hear the sound of my own heartbeat. She murmured, "Renata, I don't understand any of this at all. You have always been someone very important to me, and I consider you to be a second mother to me," she said with perfect honesty. It had been a number of years since she was the one who was trembling instead of me, and this was the first time. There is no such thing as truth. Everything is untrue. Whenever she needed help, she would employ a soft, pleasant tone of speech that she kept just for such moments. It was the same voice that she had used in the past to ask me for money in order to buy the wedding dress, the honeymoon, and the rings. I had provided financial assistance for all of these things, not thinking that I would never get to watch the ceremony when they were exchanged. For as long as I can remember, I have been plagued by an unrelenting sense of concern that I am always on tiptoes around other people. I offer my son gifts and carefully analyze each and every word, gesture, and present that I give in hopes of earning even a small measure of his loyalty. I have always been the perfect mother, the nice mother-in-law, and the unassuming provider. Additionally, I have never raised any objections to the way that they treated me as like I did not exist. Despite this, the words, "only special people," brought about an emotion inside of me that had been sitting dormant for a period of time that seemed absolutely impossible. Over the course of those 3 years, I kept track of the amount of money that I had spent on each of them, having calculated these amounts in my head. The whole amount came to more than $20,000 once all of the expenses had been taken into consideration, including those related to rent, meals, gifts, emergencies, and whims. In order to ensure that I would be able to spend the last years of my life in both comfort and luxury, I withdrew $20,000 from the retirement fund in which I had been investing, $20,000 from my savings, and $20,000 from the inheritance that my late husband had left to me. What was the function of all of those items? On the day that my own flesh and blood walks down the aisle toward matrimony, to be treated as though I were a complete unknown that evening, after the phone call had come to an end, I went to lie down on my bed and ended up breaking down in tears. Those tears, in contrast, did not originate from someone who was weeping as a result of being overcome with feelings of sadness. Tears of anger, tears of frustration that had built up over a long period of time, and tears of humiliation that had been silently suffered for years were streaming down their faces. I cried every single time they forced me to feel as though my presence was an imposition on them, that my love was a burden that they did not want, and that the only thing I had to provide was money. Due to my own ignorance, I was unaware of how much I had failed as a mother. This caused me to become filled with emotion. I also cried because of the woman who had lost herself by straining herself to the point of becoming noteworthy to those who thought that she was not important. When I opened my eyes again the following morning, something within me had been transformed. The feeling of betrayal was just one of the many elements that accompanied the experience of being tricked. It was not the only one. This proved to be substantially more impactful and unsettling than the previous method. After I had gotten up, I went to the restroom and glanced at the mirror, where I saw an image of myself. The same eyes that were permanently weary, and the same lines that narrated a tale of years in which I gave love without receiving any in return were both present. Nevertheless, there was one additional characteristic that I exhibited, a sternness that I had never previously observed in myself. It was a resolve that had been buried beneath years of subservience. I went into the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee on this particular day, which happened to be the 40th anniversary of the day that I originally performed this exercise. Every morning of my life, I had performed the same procedure without fail. This time, I decided against giving Max a call to ask him about the quality of the sleep that he was obtaining. I was looking forward to receiving an apology from him for the embarrassing situation he had put me in the day before, so I refrained from checking my phone. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I made my personal needs a priority and took care of myself. I mourned silently at the moments when I was seated at the table, counting out the bills for their expenses, because they treated me with apathy, despite the fact that I had planned so many surprises for them. This table would provide proof of a scenario that is significantly different from the one that it initially depicted at this point in time. After I got my checkbook and my statements from the bank, I began to work on the computations. I decided to set my curiosity to the side and look for a resolution to the problem of how stupid I truly am. After this sum was compounded for 36 months, which is equivalent to the monthly rent of $500, the total reached $18,000. Supplies and food, which usually cost approximately $200 every month, suffered an additional charge amounting to $7,200. The automobile, which had a cost of $2,500, was the motivation for their decision to take out a loan from me. Nevertheless, they never repaid a single penny of the amount that they owed. Additionally, they have not returned the $800 that they took out for the purpose of paying for Lena's medical problems. These celebrations include the exchange of presents for events like as birthdays, anniversaries, and Christmas, with a minimum expenditure of $3,000. The $600 that they paid to get their unit's air conditioner repaired. The median value of the place of living was $33,400. The total value of the furniture that was used for decorating the living room came to $1,200. I had contributed the same amount before to that point in time. I had been putting money aside for many years via diligent labor, and I had also been saving money from my pension and inheritance from my husband. All of this money, amounting to $33,400, went to waste. Money was wasted trying to make two adults happy who were not even prepared to treat me with the bare minimum of respect or decency. I was cognizant of the fact that the phone was ringing and that the name Max was displayed on the screen. This time, I let it continue ringing for 1, 2, and 3 rings. If I had been the recipient of his phone call, I would have been really excited to get it. I would have been waiting for it with great anticipation, hoping that he would finally give an explanation and make it clear that everything had been a misunderstanding. Under normal conditions, my heart would have been pounding in my chest as a result of the haste with which I was moving to answer the phone call. Following the passage of a given amount of time, the situation ultimately returned to its previous state of quietness. I continued to pretend that there was nothing unusual about the situation as I sipped my coffee. Following its first ring, it stopped ringing for a delay of 10 minutes before it started ringing again. This time it was Lena who had an edge over the rest of the group. I also let it continue to ring without answering the phone. Max sent a message after that. "Please respond if you can, Mother. We need to talk," I wrote, but before I could respond, I deleted the message. I made the decision to go for a walk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had not done it in months without a specific reason, without an errand that was tied to them. The bank was always the place they went to when they needed to make transfers. They went to the grocery to purchase anything that they needed, and they went to the pharmacy to get Lena's meds. I decided to go for a stroll as soon as I felt like it today. I walked by the park where I had taken Max to frequently when he was a child. I was reminded of that adorable youngster who gave me a tight hug and told me that I was the best mother in the world. At what point in time had he transformed into this man who treated me as though I were an ATM equipped with emotions? At what point did I begin to become confused between love and money? When did I begin to assume that I needed to purchase my own son's affection? I paused in front of the door at the bank, where I had made automatic transfers on numerous occasions in the past. Mr. Clean, the manager of the branch, spotted me through the glass and waved. For many years, I had been acquainted with him. All of the transfers that I had made to Max and Lena had been processed by him. 4 months on end. He had watched as my account emptied to replenish theirs. I went inside and went straight to his office. I wrote a notification to Clean letting them know that it was of the utmost importance for me to cancel the automated transfers that I had set up in the past. When he looked in my direction, the expression of shock that was on his face made itself known. These fluctuations have been occurring with the same consistency as the sunrise for a duration totaling 3 years. Is it possible that you could be absolutely sure that that is the case, Mrs. Richter? Did an incident of that nature actually occur? Max had not expressed any interest in me in the months that had before, but the worry that he felt was bigger than any attraction he had previously expressed. His anxiety was felt deeply and truly. "In the end, I opened my eyes," I said in response, and that is exactly what took place. I would like to cancel everything, and I would also require information about how I can safeguard my accounts. The ability to gain access to my cash will not be granted to any other individuals. I wish to avoid doing so. Mr. Clean was handling the cancellations when my cell phone would not stop buzzing. Max placed third, Lena placed first, and Max placed second once more. It would appear that they had developed radar for the sole purpose of pinpointing the moments in time when their revenue was under threat. I turned the phone off by switching it off fully. As he approached me, he stated, "Richter, I apologize for intruding on you in this manner, but over the course of all these years, I have seen you demonstrate an incredible generosity towards your family." He continued speaking as he gave me the paperwork. He made the comment, "I hope that you are not being coerced into making these changes," and the remarks that he said resonated with me on a deeply basic level. This individual, who was only marginally familiar with me and with whom my interactions were limited to banking transactions, demonstrated a greater level of genuine concern for my well-being than my own child did. "Mr. Clean, I am not being coerced into anything. In contrast, I have now stopped putting pressure on myself. When I left the bank, I got a strange feeling of lightness, as if I had left a tremendous burden behind in that office. My money was completely mine for the first time in years. I did not have any financial commitments to those who viewed me solely as a means to an end rather than as a person. After I got home, I lay down and considered everything that I had not accomplished in order to satisfy Max and Lena. The excursions I had not gone on in order to put money aside for them. The pals with whom I no longer keep in touch since I was always there to assist them whenever they had an emergency. I had given up on the hobbies I enjoyed because I felt that every dollar I spent on myself was a dollar that should have been spent on their needs instead. I discovered 3 automobiles that had been parked in front of my door when I arrived home. There were Max's, Lena's, and one that I was unfamiliar with. I was able to observe motion taking place inside my home through the windows. I became chilled to the bone. They were in possession of the keys. I had entrusted them with the keys because I had faith in them. I believed that they would eventually look out for me in the same way that I had looked out for them in the past. Prior to opening the door, I inhaled deeply. The first true conflict that I had ever experienced in my new life had arrived. The moment I walked through the door to my home, I was greeted by a sight that I will remember for the rest of my life. Max was sitting on my couch with his hands resting on his head. Lena was pacing back and forth in the room, like a caged animal, as soon as I walked in. On my dining table, there was an elderly man whose identity was unknown to me, sifting through the files. I asked, my voice coming out with more force than I had anticipated. They stared at me with the same expression they would have given me if I had been an intruder who had broken into my own house. My papers, my personal documents, and my sensitive documents. As soon as Lena opened her mouth, she exclaimed, "Thank God you're here, Renata," her voice carrying the same sense of anxious rush that I had already picked up over the telephone. Mr. Fisher stated, "We must sit down and have a conversation about this. My name is Mr. Fisher, and I represent the law firm that you consulted regarding your situation. The circumstances surrounding you." Asked the question. I was not the slightest bit bothered by the things that I said. I answered with a level of coolness that startled even me. "Mother, we went to the bank, and they informed us that you had called off all of the transfers," Max said after what felt like an eternity, looking up at me with a gaze that reminded me of the eyes of the child that he once was. These eyes were no longer able to retain the naivete that is characteristic of children. They just served as a representation of the financial turmoil of the present day. "What situation are you referring to?" Klein made the additional statement that you restricted our ability to access our accounts. You prevented our ability to access your accounts, as described by Mr. Klein. We are at a loss to understand the reason for your decision to do that. Fisher, a man who is in his 50s and is wearing a gray suit and a smile that does not instill confidence, said as he approached me with his hand extended. Mrs. Dr. Fisher, who practices family law and is an attorney, introduces himself as Richter. "Your children are worried about my mental health and have asked me to evaluate the situation." Rather than extending my hand to shake his, I walked over to the dining table and collected all of the paperwork he had been looking at without my permission. This paperwork is considered to be classified and private documents. Max made a comment in a condescending manner that he had mastered over the course of several years. Before you have a look at them, you need to get my permission first. You do not possess the authority to look at them. We are worried about you, Mother. As of late, you have been exhibiting some quite odd behavior. First and foremost, you ended our financial support without providing any sort of reason. Following that, you do not return any of our phone calls. As she drew closer to me, Lena made an attempt to grasp my hand while she declared, "I think that you are in need of the help of a professional." It was then that I became aware of the insincere compassion that she reserved for moments when she had ulterior motives. "Renata, we are aware that you are dealing with a great deal of stress. To us, you are incredibly important. It is that the impact of the loneliness is more significant than you are prepared to admit. Episodes of confusion are a completely natural phenomenon for people of your age," someone said to me. The phrase confusion reverberated in my thoughts in a manner that was reminiscent of the ear-piercing sound of an alarm bell. The motivation behind the employment of the lawyer has become apparent to me now. Offering me assistance was not a factor in that situation in any way. It was connected to the assertion that I was mentally incapable and the assumption of authority over my financial affairs. It did not take long for the woman who had previously given me to understand that they would only be extended invites to their nuptials to those folks who held a significant place in their hearts to start treating me as though I were a doddering old party. Everyone fell silent as I forcefully retorted, "I am not at all bewildered. Mr./Mrs./Ms. last name. I am going to ask you to leave my home immediately," Fisher stated, using the professional voice that attorneys employ when they wish to appear reasonable. "I am more lucid than I have been in years. Mrs. I understand that you are feeling overwhelmed, Richter, but your children have the right to intervene if they believe that your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have employed the term concerning behaviors to characterize a large number of the actions that they have witnessed." The giggle that escaped from my throat was harsh and almost malicious in its nature. Concluding that my money is something that belongs to me and making the choice to no longer financially support the life of two grown-ups who treat me like I am useless. What does it entail? As though I had delivered a blow to her with the back of my hand, Lena suddenly sprung to her feet. "You are one of us, so to speak. There is nothing that we have done to you that could be considered cruel. One day, everything that you currently own will become our property. We are just speeding up the procedure. That is the simple, straightforward truth of the matter. In the end, they would be the proprietors of all of the things that belong to me. They were eagerly awaiting the time when they would inherit property from me far before my passing, and in their minds, I was already dead and buried. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left to live. They didn't see me as anything more than an automated teller machine that walked on two legs. I yelled, "Out," while gesturing toward the door. Max got up from his seated position and put on the petulant juvenile expression that he saved for times when something stood in his way of achieving his goals. "The three of you had better leave my house immediately," he said. "Mother, we are under a moral obligation to do something about this place. There is no way for you to break off our relationship all of a sudden," I responded, increasing the volume of my voice for the first time throughout the entire discussion. "I am capable of meeting my financial obligations, such as paying the loans for my car, the credit card that you co-signed for me, and the rent, as it is my responsibility to do so. How can anyone prove that I am incapable of doing so? For a long period of time, I paid the rent for a place of residence that was not registered under my name. I loaded up a refrigerator in a house where my presence was not desired. I funded a life that didn't have any room for me in the first place," said Mr. and Mrs. Richter, Fisher as he removed a folder from his bag and placed it on my table. "We have drafted a number of documents that could make this transition less complicated," he continued. "These documents are capabilities that would allow Max and Lena to manage your financial affairs in a more efficient manner, such as a power of attorney." Without so much as looking at it, I snatched the folder out of his hand and tossed it straight into the wastebasket. "This is only going to be a temporary measure until you begin to get a little better." Lena started to cry, but these tears were not ones of sorrow. "The only transition that will take place here is your exit through the front door," she said to me. Those were tears that stemmed from frustration and from fury that had been kept behind a tight lid. Renata, this is something that you cannot do to the rest of us. You were relying on both of us. We developed intervention techniques that would rely on the support that you would supply. We purchased a few items. We assumed financial obligations because we were confident that we could rely on you, I responded with a statement. Those obligations are related to my finances, I said to him. Not on my money, not on my happiness, not on my company, and not on my well-being. Because of my decision to be better off using my money for my own benefit, I am suddenly an elderly woman who is confused and needs a legal guardian. I took a step back when Max tried to approach me with questions. That child was no longer the child who would run into my arms whenever he was experiencing nightmares. He had changed. He was under the impression that his mother was an impediment that was preventing him from experiencing the wealthy lifestyle that other people were paying for him to experience. He was 35 years old at the time. He went on to explain, "Mother, we have made mistakes," trying his best to keep any semblance of remorse out of his voice. A communication failure occurred regarding the wedding. Lena had a burst of anxiety that coursed through her body, almost as if she had been struck by electricity. I was under a great deal of stress. If you would just agree to become reasonable once more, then we can resolve this issue. Reasonable. The term left an awful taste in my mouth, and on my tongue. It is important to be reasonable when you treat me as though I am a stranger. This means that you must continue to pay for your own existence. That would be pretending that being excluded from the most important day in the lives of my only child doesn't cause any pain. Max, before leaving, turned around to look at me one final opportunity. "Mother, you are going to come to a terrible end because of this," he remarked in response. With a deep feeling of sorrow, but also with a clarity that was as lucid as glass, I responded, "Max, at the end of the day, you are going to be all by yourself, and there will be nobody there to look out for you when you truly need it. I am already by myself. What has changed is that, as a result of your negligence, I am now the person who gets to make the decision instead of you," I stated as I closed the door behind them. In the living room, I was surrounded by a silence that was the most lovely silence that I had experienced in years. The quiet that welcomed liberty was precisely that. Quiet that followed the moment of emancipation. It was a struggle to get to sleep that night. This was not due to feelings of regret or guilt. Rather, I was in a state of excessive excitement because of the adrenaline rush I experienced after having taken back command of my own life. Lying in bed, I devised my next line of action as if I were a general getting ready to go into battle. The generated text was blocked by the content filters. If I were to become embroiled in a conflict, I would approach it with intelligence rather than with emotion. On the other hand, I had already completed getting dressed, and I was prepared to embark on the first step of my day at 6 o'clock in the morning. I went to the office of Mr. Weber, who was an attorney that I had become familiar with previously since I was handling the will of my husband, as my first stop on that day. The protection of elderly citizens' rights was within Mr. Weber's area of expertise, and he was widely known for his work in that field. This distinguished him from Mr. Fisher, who was the individual that Max and Lena had brought in. "Weber, I listened to you very carefully when you described the situation. I can sense that you are not only serious but also empathetic, despite what you may think." After a long pause, he said something. "What your children attempted to do yesterday is more common than you may realize," he stated to me, Richter. "This is known as elder financial abuse, and it is a violation of federal law. The fact that they entered your home without your permission and reviewed your private documents is also a violation of the law." I found his words to be both comforting and frightening. They gave me some comfort once they decided that I was not mentally ill and that what had happened to me was really abusive. I was filled with horror by them because I came to the realization that the situation was far more serious than I had originally thought. "It is our responsibility to make sure that everything is documented," Mr. Weber stated. "We spent 3 hours going over the details of my financial paperwork. We shall make adjustments to your will so that your property is protected from any future efforts to manipulate it whenever they compelled you to give them a gift or money or made you transfer something to them. As soon as Mr. Weber saw the final figure, which came to $33,400 after 3 years, he let out a whistle. "You could have lived a comfortable life, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement with this money," he stated with shock and astonishment. "You have decided to provide financial support for 2 adults who were not even polite enough to invite you to their wedding, Mrs. Richter." As I left Mr. Weber's office, I had a completely formed plan in my head. The first thing that I would do is replace all of the locks on the doors to my house. Secondly, I would purchase and install a security system that includes cameras in order to ensure that I am protected from any potential future surprise visits. Thirdly, I would establish a new bank account with a different financial institution that has no prior ties to them whatsoever. In fourth place would be to begin living the life that I have been putting off for many years. The hardware store that sells building supplies was the next place that I stopped at on my trip. I had established myself as a frequent customer at the store, where I purchased supplies with the intention of renovating Max and Lena's apartment. Mr. Summer, who happened to be the proprietor of the shop, had been acquainted with me for quite a long time as a result of this. On the other hand, this time around, things turned out differently. "Mrs. Richter, could you tell me why you came here today?" "This time it's for my own house," he said, using the familiar tone of someone who has been a quiet witness to my misplaced generosity. "I am in need of replacing every one of the locks and would like them to be of the highest quality," I explained to Mr. Summer. He did not pose a single question to me, but I got the impression from the look on his face that he was perplexed. Ethan, his son, stopped by to visit while I was in the process of picking the locks. Installation of security systems is a skill in which Ethan is a specialist. It's nothing short of a miracle or a divine intervention. Those are the only ways to explain it. While they were getting everything prepared for the installation, which was planned to take place the next day, I took a call from an unknown phone number. I told Ethan, "I also need to have the surveillance cameras installed. The expense is of no concern to me. I need to have the whole system." Because I had blocked her number after the battle that we had just the day before, Lena had to be the one who was phoning from another person's phone. "Renata, this is Lena. Please listen to what I have to say before you make the decision to terminate the conversation. I would like to talk to you as civilized adults," I said. "Say what you have to say," you said in a monotone tone. "I understand that you are upset about the wedding. It was an error. Max and I have discussed the matter, and we would like to make peace with you. How does the idea of commemorating our marriage by treating you to a unique meal seem to you? We may host it at your place if you would like." She made the statement. "Lena, would you be able to provide me with the precise amount of money that you still owe in rent?" With the intention of manipulating me, which is why I was on the edge of bursting out in laughter because of how obvious it was. I was reminded of the times that we used to cook together when I heard her remarks. I knew that I had brought up a sensitive subject because I received no response from the other person on the other end of the telephone line. The amount comes to $1,000, which is due over the course of 2 months. "Renata, I'm not making this call solely to discuss that matter, however. Do you long for me, or is it my money that you pine for? We feel a deep sense of loss in our lives because of your absence." I did not hesitate to say, "The 2 of us are in the right." She reacted with such forthrightness that it even shocked her. "Renata, I won't lie to you. Indeed, we require your financial assistance, but we care about you as well. You mean a great deal to us." "If that's the case," I began to tell you in great detail, "why wasn't I important enough to attend your wedding? Why don't I receive any phone calls that don't ask me for money? I must not be important enough. When was the last time you contacted me just to check in and see how I was doing?" Another brief moment of silence ensued. Both of us were well aware of what the solution was. "Lena, I am only going to tell this to you once. You have treated me like nothing more than an ATM with feelings for 3 years. You were a tool for me to employ. You completely forgot that I exist. You made me feel ashamed. And in conclusion, you committed the gravest insult against me imaginable. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me," she said. "Renata, please." She interrupted the conversation for a brief period of time. "There is no please in this case," I declared emphatically, interrupting you. I was unable to continue speaking with you after that, so I hung up the phone and turned it off completely. This was in response to the fact that you had reached the conclusion that I was not suitable enough to attend your wedding and decided to exclude me. Now I am making my own decision. I did not want there to be any additional disruptions on the day that I was finally able to be free. After a period of 1 year during which I did not visit the beauty salon, I made the decision to go there that day. I frequently had to reschedule my appointments for either Lena or Max because they urgently needed something at the last minute or because the money I had reserved for myself became an emergency for them. The moment that I laid eyes on you, Richter, I was so shocked that I exclaimed, "Mrs. Cynthia is my preferred hairstylist, and that is the name by which she is known." Cynthia reported that she proceeded to give herself to the entire treatment, which included a manicure, a pedicure, a haircut, and coloring. "I was under the impression that you had forgotten about us," she stated in response. "I did not forget about you," someone yelled out. For the first time in a long time, I made the decision to indulge myself with something extravagant, and I did not feel a single pang of guilt about the amount of money that I spent. Cynthia spoke with me about her life, her children, and her aspirations as she was working on my hair at the same time. It was a nice change of pace to participate in a discourse that did not center around the needs of Max and Lena. "Mrs. Richter, you look beautiful," she said once the task was over. "But above all else, you look free," I replied. Putting a question to Cynthia, she asked, "Was anything positive that occurred today?" I eventually learned how to say no, I replied. "That's right. I did not recognize the automobile that was parked in front of my door when I got home that afternoon. I noticed that my pulse was beating at an increasing pace as I was moving closer and closer to my home. At that point, it dawned on me that it was possible that Max and Lena had come back with reinforcements. I was surprised to discover that the person who was sitting on the steps leading up to the porch of my house was actually an elderly woman when I drew closer to her. As I was getting out of the car, she questioned, "Mrs." Her question was met by the response from Richter, "Yes, that would most certainly be I. Is there anything I can do to aid you? My name is Eleonora Brooks. I am someone from the neighboring house. We have never really had the chance to have a conversation with one another, despite the fact that we have been neighbors for many years. I was really worried yesterday since I heard really loud noises coming from your apartment. Is there anything that is not all right with you?" As I recounted the entire story to her while I was making the coffee, Eleonora remained silent and did not interrupt. She nodded from time to time. Her eyes were brimming with tears after I had finished telling her my story. "I'll make you a coffee and tell you a story that you won't believe," I said as I let Mrs. Brooks come in. Her true worry deeply affected my emotions. This person was a complete stranger who was far more interested in my well-being than my own son was. As soon as I became aware that they only contacted me when they needed something, I stopped providing them with financial support, I said after inquiring about it. "Everything was horrible in the beginning. They made threats against me, used emotional blackmail against me, and attempted to make me feel guilty. After 6 months had passed, my daughter called me to offer a sincere apology. Do you think that one day Max and Lena will come to understand this?" she inquired. Her statements provided me with reassurance because she said, "I believe I have done what needed to be done." They also instilled in me a sense of optimism. "We now have a genuine relationship that is based on love rather than money," she said. I asked her with curiosity in my voice, and she replied with complete honesty, "Perhaps I do, and perhaps I do not. Regardless of that, you are no longer responsible for taking on that obligation, Mrs. Richter. Your responsibility at this point in your life is to live your own life." That evening, I went to bed without worrying for the first time in 3 years about whether Max and Lena had enough money to pay for their wants, food, and rent. I slept better than I have in years after going to bed with my plans for the future and myself on my mind. Ethan and Mr. Summer showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning on the day following that one to replace the locks and to install the security system. I was bombarded with a constant barrage of phone calls from numbers that I did not recognize while I was biding my time till they had finished working. In order to get through to me, Lena made continuous attempts using a number of different phones, but I had acquired a new skill: ignoring calls that I did not find to my favor.